I know many of you have seen me do lots of decoupage in the past. It's a while since I've done it, so I thought I'd take you on that journey. And I suppose hand painting over an image sometimes can be quite daunting, but I'm just gonna help you along with those little techniques that just blend that paper seamlessly away. We'll be using Posh Chalk's Deluxe decoupage paper, and it is actually one of my own hand-painted images that I painted for the range. So it should be pretty easy to match in colours because all of the paintwork done in that image was with chalk paint. So let's take a closer look at the project. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do for this decoupage project is to prep everything ready to receive the paper. And one of the things that I'm going to do is remove these handles. As lovely as they are, the pattern of the paper is quite busy and there's lots of design. So I want to make this just a single handle in the middle, like a knob in the center of each drawer, so it doesn't interrupt the pattern that I'm going to place on the top of this small cabinet. So these handles, in the UK we get a lot of these. They're a faux kind of Victorian handle. They come with these little caps over the top of the, there's a little bolt usually underneath. They're not usually screwed in, there's a little bolt. So we need to remove them, and how I'm going to do that is just take a screwdriver and slightly beside the little bolt, not bolt, cap, whatever you want to call it, you can just wiggle it out and there you go, it removes. I would save these, if you do get hold of these, they're a little bit like a furniture glide. I would save them because, let me show you, this is how I recreated this piece of artwork with the verdigris look. If you look there, you can see I've added a strip down the middle. This could be hard cardboard, and you can stipple over it and add these in and you get that really wonderful sort of galvanized metal, or verdigris in this case, and they come really in handy. Okay, so I'm going to fill the holes on the cabinet. So I want to fill all of the holes and any other areas that might need a bit of filler. And the filler that I'm going to be using is, this is a 2-part wood filler. So there is a little bit of liquid that goes into this, which hardens the filler much quicker. So within 5 minutes, this filler will have gone off and I'll be able to sand it smooth, ready for painting. Okay, so I'm going to take you through some of the logistical things that you might find on your project, and at this point I think it's really crucial to kind of cover these things off. So whilst the filler is drying, I'm thinking about pushing these drawers all back in, but then how do you open the drawers once you've filled the holes and you've got no handle on there? So I'm going to pre-drill a hole in the center ready to receive my new handles, which was an Amazon find, this brushed brass handle, which is really lovely. So I'm going to find the central part of each drawer, drill the hole. Once the hole is drilled, we're not going to put the handle back on because we've got to decoupage it, but what that will allow is to take a small screwdriver back into the hole, bend the screwdriver down, and it will allow us to free the drawer up. Once we've got the base coat of paint on here, we're going to decoupage over the whole thing, so it will be completely concealed until we free up the drawers by cutting it with a blade around the edge. And that means we can go back in with the screwdriver, free up the drawer, clean up the edges. It may take another little coat of paint around the drawers because this is all going to be painted as is flat. So let's start with drilling the holes. I've got my drill bits down here. I'm just going to marry up the size of the screw hole. No rhyme or reason. Yep, that drill bit will fit nicely into the drill. Right, we're going to push the drawers back in now to do this. And we're going to measure across the drawer. That's simple, 15 inches. So that gives me mathematics, 15 inches, 7.5. 7.5 inches, and we're going to make a little mark at 7.5 inches with a pencil. So just there. And then I'm going to guesstimate between, no I won't, I'll measure, let's measure. So we have 4.5 inches, so that'll be 2.25. So just there, and I got it right by eye, it's just there. So I'm going to go in now with the drill on that point. So now we have the hole. We can't get the drawer out, but we can, if we stick the screwdriver into the hole, we can oink it out just like so. So that is a good thing to remember before you start decoupaging. Pre-drill your holes if you're filling in, and then you can get access to your drawers afterwards. Once I finished drilling all of the holes for the handles on the drawer front, I decided to take 120 sandpaper and sand the filler away by hand, ready for the next part of the process, which is painting. I'm about to approach my prep work for the decoupage paper. So as I said, I'm using Posh Chalk Deluxe decoupage paper, which is actually a rice paper. So if you're using a rice paper, this might be of use to you. So rice paper is built in with fibers to add strength. Now these are little white feathery fibers that sit in the paper that really add durability. Now I think always with any decoupage usually is to paint the piece of furniture white, ready to receive that paper. If you don't, if you paint it black or just stick it straight over to the top of a brown piece of furniture like this, then you will probably see those fibers. Other decoupage papers don't have them and they're slightly thicker, so you could probably get away with it, but with this, most definitely. The other thing is, as you've seen me just do, lots of sanding. Now I know these pieces of furniture quite well, we get a lot of them in the UK, and when you eat into under the varnish, you can get some bleed through where the timber is shown. This is why you haven't seen me clean the piece. Not many of my pieces I overly clean, because if I add water or wetness to this, it's going to only activate the tannelins in the timber beneath. So I'm not going to do that. I could go straight in for a Zinza 123 primer coat just to stop bleed through, but just to save a step in the process, I will apply a coat of paint to the surface, and then this will show me, as it dries, it will show me where that bleed through is, if we get any. Usually I'm pretty lucky with these. And the other thing that I'm going to do, I'm prepping for a white coat, so we get the lovely crisp colours on the surface of the decoupage papers, but I'm not going to go in with white because white can usually take two and a half coats. I'm going to go in with country grey, which is also a great colour for knocking bleed through back in the timber. So we're going to go country grey, one coat. It will look kind of streaky, and then we'll go back in with one of the whites. Which one have I pulled out? Original, which is quite a creamy white anyway, and we'll give it a full surface coat to the whole piece. I'm not going to do top and bottom because they're going to have a different colourway just through the centre of the whole piece. Country grey coat has gone pretty well. I can virtually see zero bleed through, so I'm good to go at this point with the white. And I wanted to talk through the bleed through and why I'm actually worrying about it even though I'm decoupaging, and that's because once you add lots of wet glue to the surface, your bleed through can come through to the surface of your decoupage. You may not think that you would need to worry about these steps, but I would definitely advise you do this. And if you have bleed through on this stage, on your country grey, then that would be a good time now to go back in with your stain blocking primer, and then you can go back in with your white of choice. In this case, I'm using Original. So we're going to give it another coat of Original, and we should be just about there, ready for decoupage. Once your white coat has just about dry, it's surface dry here, there will be a gathering of paint in the connection. So at this point, I think this is crucial to do, is take your screwdriver back in to your pilot hole, bring the drawer out, or all of the drawers out, and just clean up with your finger around the edge. See, paint underneath, just clean that up. You may need to take a little bit of sandpaper if you've been heavy with your paint, just to free the drawers again. Remember, we're going to be decoupaging, we're going to be adding glue, so paint plus glue is going to get quite cloggy in those connections. So free up all of your drawers ahead of decoupage into this drawer. Oops. See, it's quite tight, and I can see underneath here where I've built up the paint, I can see quite a lot of paint there. I'm just taking my nail, but you could use a little bit of sandpaper, just free up all of the edges around each drawer so that they'll slide in and out. And once we get that glue on there, we'll have to cut through the glue. Also, let's take a look at the actual paper that I'm going to be using. This is one of the House of Mendes range. My paper, as I said before, you'll have all seen me use this one before. It's my favourite. It repeats in our house quite a few times. And here we have it. Utopia. There is another one, which is Utopia Grand, which is A1, and it's only that side of the image, which leads me to think about placement on the piece of furniture. So at this stage, now we've got the white background, we can place this on the surface and work out. Now, the initial thing is to go straight round in the middle and round the corner, but look at that, we lose an awful lot of the pattern. There's nothing going on in the middle, so I'm going to have to either use this side of the paper and go around there and add pattern onto that side, or the other way around. So I'm just going to take a quick look at how that looks. My favourite side of the image is that, and I know that this side of the cabinet is going up against the bed, and you can see the top half of the cabinet. This side is going against the wall. So what I'm thinking is we'll use my favourite side, which is this side. And this is probably, look at that for a fit. It just about fits the whole, it does, once it's had the edges cut off. And we'll wrap it that way. So that will nearly get a full side there. We maybe come a little bit over to this edge, so it's just kind of a little bit off center. Also, now that we've painted it white, we can see exactly where the hole marks are for the handles. So this gives you a good time to check where they are in connection with the overall image. So I know it's gonna, that one handle's gonna sit up here, one handle will sit here, another handle will sit here, and the other one there. So it really doesn't interrupt any of the beautiful image. I might shift it along a little bit that way, just to wrap it on that corner as well. But I do want to keep all of the bird on this side. So just a little bit around that corner, and then we can paint in the other side. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do when cutting my decoupage paper is you have to remove the leading edge. It has a framework around this paper, and you have to remove that. Now, a good way of removing the edges around the paper, if your furniture piece is bigger than the actual piece of paper, is to take a wet paintbrush and just do a wiggly line all the way down, and then tease the sides away with your fingers. So you'll end up with a wiggly line which can be then blended away with your paint straight into the piece of furniture. It'll distort the eye when it comes to where the connection is. In this case, the actual piece of paper is bigger than the edges of this piece of paper. So what I need to do, I want to keep as much sky as possible at the top. I'm going to take that edge off, and I've got to kind of make a mark. So I'm going to make a little groove with my fingernail along the bottom, so I know just how much needs cutting off. So So that's the top. And it's only a fraction bigger. So I've now got about a centimetre or just under a centimetre to take off the lower edge, and then I can take all of the other edges off. We may go back in and add a wiggly line to this side because that's where it's going to connect into our paintwork on the other side. I just want to see where it sits first. Okay, so I'm about to apply the decoupage, but I have found an issue ahead of time, which is good. When you find these issues ahead of time, you can kind of help yourself along a little bit. So this cabinet is pretty much square, but underneath here, let me show you. On this edge, it's square and it goes square at the top and the bottom, but there is a slight bevel in the center of here, like it goes in and back up to the square. I know I would have normally applied this straight on and round that corner if it had been a sharp corner, but I know that when I place this down, I'm going to be sharp on the edges here, and then this paper is going to have a little bit more extra space to go around the middle, and what it will create is wrinkles either way on this side. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to carefully line everything up. I'm going to mark out the square edge here by just rubbing the paper so I can see where that is, and then I'm going to fold the paper in half, meeting that connection and that connection, and cut it straight down with a pair of scissors in a nice neat line, which means that when I come back to joining the edge on the corner here and here, I can play around with the pattern in the middle. I might have to lose a sliver out of the center, and we'll have to probably touch this in with paint, which is not an issue to me because I do want to add a little bit more blue to the sky so I can just blend seamlessly away around that corner. So first thing to do, chop off that edge, and then we can start applying the top, the front surface, and then we'll go around the side and we'll try and work out what happens in the middle. So the moment of truth has arrived. We're going to apply the decoupage paper to the cabinet. I have two of these brushes. These are Posh chalk brushes, one for application of the Posh chalk infuser. That's a bit gooey. Posh chalk infuser. This is an awesome decoupage medium. You can use it for many other things as well within their range of products. A nice healthy coat. I'm not going to go at this at section by section. I think the paper's got enough stretching in there to apply it all in one go. One thing that I'm being mindful of is this funny connection here that we've just cut the paper for. I'm not going to apply glue to this section. I'm just going to go to the corner and around as neat as I can. So it allows me freedom to work out where the connection is on the other side. But I'm going to work from the bottom across and work my way up in smoothing with the bigger brush. So smoothing along, up and in and out of all of the grooves. So once I've applied it, it will kind of smooth itself away. The other side has got the slightly teared edge, and that will just tuck into that groove, so I'm not worried about that. So, wish me luck, off we go. So I'm applying plenty of the infuser, so it really does make sure it's got good connection. Also, I will be applying the infuser over the top as a top coat to seal it in, and the paper is kind of permeable, so it will meet, the infuser will meet from the bottom and the top, and it will combine as one, and it will make it really hard and very durable. So when applying the infuser, make sure that you don't miss any areas. And that's why these big brushes are really good, because it allows you to spread around. So you want to make sure it's all tucked into all of those grooves. Every little groove and all of the edges. And work fairly quick at this, because it can dry out in warmer climates. It can dry out a little bit quicker than it does here in a very cold workshop. I can feel that the infuser is just beginning to pull a little bit on the brush. And don't worry about all of those connections. We will free them up with a blade a little later on. So that is on. Make sure you keep your brush in water, because it will dry out. So I'm going to leave it in the sink over there. Right, the fun part. So I'm going to drop it all on in one go, but I'm going to try and line up the best I can to the edge that we just cut. So I can bring that a little bit this way. Like I said, there is a bit of wriggle room with these. You can pull them about a little bit. Make sure that's nice and lined up there. Feels pretty good. So I'm going to go in with my bigger brush. This is dry and clean, and we're just going to tuck it into that lower edge. I have got a little bit of an overlap, but that's good, because we're going to paint that trim afterwards. So we can paint over that. Right, starting from the bottom, and we're going to try and just kind of shimmy it in to the gaps of the aperture of the drawer. Using my nail just to kind of help push that in. There is lots of lumps and bumps on these drawers. going to get a stiffer brush, I think. What have we got in here? Not that one. Stiff brush. That might do it. Yeah, this is a chip brush I'm using just to push into those edges. I think I'll just lift again. So you've got that room to kind of play around with this paper. Spreading with the larger brush into the next groove. Spreading again. Don't be frightened of this paper. It is really resilient to stretch. My little trusty chip brush, it's got really blunt bristles, so that helps just push into those grooves. Smooth that out. Next groove. Final groove at that edge. Slight wrinkle there. Smooth that final bit out. So this is about the 5th time that I've lifted it and moved it around, so it's still pretty tolerant to the stretch. Let's go back in here. So my measurement with my cut at the top, I didn't need to take anything off because of all of the grooves. It's eaten up a bit of the paper, but that's not a problem to me because ultimately I'm painting this sky back in. So that's something that you might find on your own projects. If you've got to go over all of these rebates, be mindful of leaving a bit extra, maybe trim it off afterwards. I'll give you a close-up of how that looks. But I'm happy. I know that that's an easy fix for me with paint. And it down. Few little wrinkles, but that's fine. I'm happy with that. Right, so now I'm going to go back in with the infuser while this is still wet to allow myself a little bit more stretch. Making sure it's in all of those crevices. Yes, that's lovely. So that was the difficult part done. So a little bit more infuser. I'm going to clean my brush and then we'll apply that. So I'm really happy with the way that the paper's gone on. It's nearly surface dry. What you will find at this point is anywhere where there's a rebate, the glue will still be quite wet under there because it gathers. One tip that I would say to you is, whilst this is actually drying, is to take your fingernail, ladies, this will be good for you if you've got long nails, is just to gently push into the grooves as it's drying, because that will really make sure that you get good connection right round these little rebates. So that's what I've been doing whilst it's been drying, just pushing in. Don't do it when it's too wet because it could tear the paper. You could also use the end of an artist brush with a wooden end and just to push into all of the corners. So now onward to how I connect the two papers together. So I'm thinking that I'm going to throw this on this side. It will be much easier on a flat surface. I'm going to line up from the bottom because we're losing a bit of pattern as we go up, and luckily for me it's mainly sky. I'm going to paint over that. Also, there is a slight rebate in the beveled edge, so I'm going to add the glue and push into the rebate and see what happens with the marriage between the two, and then work it out. So that's what I'm going to do now, on with the sides and application once again. I'm now day 2 of my decoupage project. I did decide to leave the decoupage to harden overnight. So where the glue would have built up underneath the infuser, where it would have built up in these connections, it would have still been slightly damp. So that's not a good time to release the drawers. So leave it a good while or place it in the sunshine to dry and harden really well. So this is always going to be the toughest part of a project with drawers, is releasing the drawers back. Like I said, there was plenty of glue that went in the connection, so this will have glued the drawers shut, and we've got to release the paper. So I'm taking a blade, this is a small craft blade, I'm going to free up the drawers. With the fibres on this paper, sometimes it can be quite tough to cut through the fibres, but just take your time and go around each drawer. If you have any lift off of the paper, then once the drawers are freed and you've tidied up the edges, you can glue that back down with the infuser just to make sure everything's a nice clean connection. So let's get stuck in and see how well these drawers release. So that is the blade all around each aperture of each drawer. So the best way I could probably advise you to take the drawers back out is either from your holes and your screwdriver from the front by doing the little technique which I showed you earlier on, or if you can get access to the bottom drawer, which I can through here, I can kind of wedge the drawer up. There is a couple of boo-boos that I made. I've lost a bit of paper, I cut slightly shy. I'm not worrying about this. It's all about painting by numbers. This will be fixed up with paint over the top once everything is stuck down. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this palette knife and I'm gonna wedge it underneath the drawer and try. It does help if you give it each drawer a little bit of a bang, because that can release it a little bit, but I'm going to just there you go, slightly prise its lifting. There we go. And once we get the first drawer off, I can get underneath with my arm and just pat them all up. There we go. So that's the first drawer released. I'll show you where I made the mistake. These drawers are particularly tight, and it can be troublesome when you've got tight drawers. Can you see there? I've lost a little bit of the decoupage, but that's minor. We can just fill that in with paint. I'm going to go back now and carefully make sure that everything's stuck down. I'm going to take my sandpaper and remove any of this excess glue and paint, so it really makes each drawer nice and tight again, and also free up the inside of here without taking any of the paper away, cleaning up each drawer. So that's my next challenge. Okay, so we have freedom of the drawers. Now this has left a few other anomalies to fix along the way, one of which the actual paintwork is getting quite dirty, but this is all going to be fixed with paint. And the other is lift off. Places like on the corner here and here, this all needs sticking back with infuser to press this back down so it's nice and smooth. Now there's a couple of ways that you could address the inner part of the drawers. Let me just open this drawer, stick that in there. That's even gunked up with glue as well. There we go. The internal of the drawer, you could paint, make a very neat line and paint a different colour. Satin paint might be good for this because it'll be much smoother for the glide. Like I said, these drawers are very tight fitting. The other thing is, once we start painting in, you could carry your colours around the drawers. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do for this project. It is for me. I might save myself the time and just tickle it in with a bit of paint, just one flat colour. The other thing about that is you've got to be really mindful not to bring it back out of the overall lip of the image. What also you could do, another idea at this stage, is just to slightly, when we start painting in the other colours, slightly bring your drawers proud. So when we start painting the sky in, it just tickles over that edge. So it kind of spreads the paint into the internal part of the drawer. Maybe take a coin or something at the back of the drawer where you can keep the drawers at a certain level, a little wooden stick on the stopper at the back. There's a lot of information there, but I really want to kind of address many of the issues when it comes to decoupaging drawers. The fibres, they'll all be hidden in the sky. They'll be hidden with paint. So it's just kind of what you expect. You kind of had to bodge it in a little bit here and there just to make sure it's seamless when it comes to the end result. So now I'm going to tackle gluing back all of the edges of each drawer. Finally, we can start thinking about touching in the paintwork on this project. So once your drawers are nice and dry around the edges, you can reapply them to the cabinet so that we can see which areas need touching in. Some areas we're going to be painting over the top and highlighting certain areas of the image. I've decided to go with my idea of allowing the drawers to be proud. So I've taken a bit of scrap wood and some paint sticks taped to the back just to get the right profile. So this is going to go in the back of the cabinet just to allow, we'll rest that there. This is difficult with one hand. So we're going to pop the drawer back in. This is the top drawer. And that's going to allow the drawer just to sit slightly proud of the edge all the way around so that I can add paint to that inner edge. Let's pop the bottom drawer back in. And you can see there's a little bit of a proud edge. So once we start painting the colours back in, that will take the pattern just slightly into the drawer, and then I can touch in on the other side of the drawer afterwards. I will be adding more blue to the sky. This is kind of quite white and pale. It didn't print in the printing process as blue as it was from the original image, but nevertheless it's still beautiful. And I'm trying to tie this together with a piece of furniture I mentioned at the top of the tutorial that I hand painted a long time ago. I'm going to post some pictures now so you can see that cabinet. I will be doing the same on the top surface of the cabinet. I do not know what colour I mixed. I do know that I used olive round the edges and there was some primer red, gold leaf, but the crackle effect on the top, I'm not too sure. So the idea is to try and imitate that cabinet with decoupage so that they sit in the room together really lovely. I suppose for many of you painters out there, this will be the most daunting task when it comes to fixing up the whole piece of furniture. So what I would say at this stage is give yourself a little moment in time to study what is going on in your decoupage paper, whatever pattern you choose, and study the colours that you see in the image. So it's a long time since I painted this. I cannot remember what colours that I used when I originally did this. I know that I'm going to be painting the sky a little bit more blue, so I'm going to be using Louis Blue and one of the whites. I've got a selection of colours here that I already think are in the pattern. So I've got Barcelona Orange, that's just to one side, that's for the rushes and the beak. We've got Louis Blue, I think that's original, Furl, Amsterdam Green, French Linen, Enfleur and Graphite. All of those colours I kind of see in here in a variety of colour mixes. I've got my mix mat here. You could use a large white dinner plate. It's a great background to mix colours. You can see the colour before you hit the surface. And where to start? I'm going to start with the largest area, the sky, and I'm going to wrap it round. We've still got this whole side to paint. So the sky is going to come halfway down, and then we're going to think about this dark background of the trees for the side. I've got a variety of brushes here to one side. AnnieSloan detail brushes, you get 4 in the selection. They should cover off everything that you need here. You just might need a cup of water to rinse out your brush before going on. I like to grab another handful of brushes just to move on. So I'm going to try and take you through all of the little fixes, the colour matches, and adding a little touch of highlighting over the top of the overall image. It will make it look more hand painted. For instance, like the feathers on the bird, I'm going to add a touch more white. The light is coming in from this side of the image. So if I just highlight the top of its head, the back of its back, with a little brush stroke, it will make it feel all the more real. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm mixing my Louis Blue. Also guys, don't do what I'm doing, dipping into the cans of paint. You might want to decant a little bit of each colour into a separate bowl. My cans of paint really do get contaminated, and when I do that, I just mix them up and go with it. I don't very often paint flat colours, so I don't worry about what happens in the can of paint. So I just mix it in and go again. But here we go. I'm touching up with a little bit of Louis Blue, and this one is original for the sky on the mix mat. And I'm going to place, now I know that that needs a little bit more blue. And I'm just going to paint in a little bit of sky. I'm using a large a small Annie brush. This is an oval, just to get a larger application. I'm going to go quite far down because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to marry in the lower half to this. We may do, it depends what pattern we choose to go with. So I'm going to go a little bit over this tree line here as well, just because I might lower this a little bit. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Touch of water in there. So at least that'll have time to dry. We may add some clouds over the top of this. Any what way. Right, now we can take this round the side. So straight underneath the top of the drawer, making sure that we go into that crevice. Don't worry about any of the edges, just make sure you get your image the way that you want it to be. Now a swirly motion with a large brush, that's difficult to say, is quite a good technique just for blending in. I'm not going to worry about this too much because I'm going to paint that back in. As long as I can just slightly see it, like hazy, I can go. And the beak of the bird, I'm not going to worry too much. I will paint that all back in. Now I'm going to add a touch more blue to the top, Louis Blue, straight Louis Blue here, to darken up the top of the cabinet, and then we'll soften out into a more of a white. Something so satisfying about painting over it as well. I don't know why. Tickle it into there. Like I said, don't worry about losing your image too much at this point, because we are going to go back and add lots of other things. Let's pick up a little bit more original to lighten this tone. So it's kind of, we're blending on the surface. More original. Offloading into the Louis Blue. And it really does freshen up the colour, which is what I was looking for. And where we had all of those dirty marks in this corner, we have now kind of fixed that issue straight away with adding the Louis Blue. I'm going to go a bit darker and more solid up here. Right, I'm going to take it round the other side. Again, Louis Blue at the top. And back with the original. Touch of water. Loosen up that paint. a light tickle over the branches so we can just see them shining through. Original touch of water with the original So I've tickled slightly over it, but what I can do, because there's the infuser here, I can remove with my finger or a cloth any paint that I'm not sure that I want in that position. Like here, look, just smudging it in with my ball of my hand. And if you really make a mistake, clean cloth, just spritz it away. Because that infuser is dry, we can kind of blend the, blur the barriers. Blur the barriers? Blur the boundaries, that's what I was looking for. There we go. So I've gone over the bird there, but I can just clean it off a little bit and then we'll go back in with more paint. Quite fiddly that, that's it. All fixable. Darken the blue at the top. There we go, I think that's pretty good. Always take a moment to stand back just to see the balance of your colours. Now I'm taking kind of a little bit of a stipply motion to the edges where light might be poking through those trees. And then I'm just going to soften that in with my rag. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to map out where this tree line goes. So I've left a slight shading of white around from the original paper. So I'm going to add a slight shading of white using some original and Louis blue along the bottom And I'm just going to tickle in with a swirly motion, touch more white. And then we'll leave this to dry. I might take, I've got a flat dry brush here just to soften that in any what way, and that will give us a nice blend. So it's now time to think about what colours we've got here in this lower ground here. Now I see a lot of, it looks quite graphite, it looks kind of a little bit French linen. There's all sorts of colours. I would say French linen, Enfleur, graphite, and maybe a touch of Amsterdam green. So I'm going to add some tones around that bottom edge just to blend in a little bit of that background. So all of this. I'm not quite sure whether to travel the pond a little bit this way. I think it kind of would end here and be more ground. So let's pull out another brush. In fact, we're just going to use the same brush. I'm going to offload some of this Louis blue and we'll mix up. I'm going to pop a little bit of graphite, Enfleur, Amsterdam green, touch of water. So I'm kind of getting the lower colours quite well. So we'll go right across the bottom here. Again, I'm just going to do a swirly motion. Tickle it in up here. I'm just going to add a touch of, this is French linen now, mixed in with that colour. Touch of water to the brush. Maybe a bit too soft a colour, that one. More on Fleur and Amsterdam green. I think that's better. Yeah, more of a muddy colour. So I'm tapping now to create a softness between the sky and it's just the end of the brush with the loaded up paint, and it should phase into one another. I'm going to go over the edge of this corner, maybe just paint in there. There's more on Fleur in this side, so I'm just going to touch a little bit of on Fleur in there. Tiny bit of graphite, it's a bit more darker. And I can touch in the other side of this drawer with these shades. Going over slightly, more graphite as we come down. Touch of Amsterdam in the graphite. Same brush, touch more graphite. There we go, it's darkening. So stipple motions are your friend when it comes to this sort of scenery. More graphite here. And I can then touch in the side of this drawer as well. More Amsterdam down here. Wrapping it around the corners. I'm going to do some big splodges of graphite in here. On fleur, just to add that brownier tone. This is how the original image was actually created. You know, all of these simple brush strokes. The brush is doing the work really, not on fleur. And Amsterdam green. Now, as a wild card, I might just tuck in some furl. So we're gonna, that's probably too much, but we're gonna add a touch of furl down here. And definitely furl along the top of this tree line at the top, because that's where the light would cast on any trees or branches. You would definitely see more furl. It's a lighter greeny, yellowy green, which it would definitely highlight the tops of the trees with the light. I'm rotating my brush as well, kind of so I think probably too much furl here. We would definitely have more furl where the light is coming across. So I'm going to add more furl along sort of this edge, as if there's trees and branches coming this way. And maybe another lump of trees here. Furl mixed with Amsterdam green just gives you nature straight away. It's really cool. And then we'll go back in and darken some of these areas. So we're going to mix a touch of the on fleur and a touch of graphite again. Just add some of these darker, rotating the brush. And you could leave it as simple as that. I will add some other details, maybe some more rushes running through all of this detail work. I'm now going to wrap round this corner and kind of go along. I've got a piece underneath here that I know is not good. I'm going to switch out for a smaller brush here. I know that I need more green on this area. That's not so good. Look, mistake. So I'm going to just take some water, take my cloth, and I know it's more Amsterdam greeny, and I'll just mix up a new bit of furl. It's quite, and maybe a touch of graphite in that Amsterdam green just to darken it. Yeah, a bit of graphite. And same thing again. Tapping in just to soften those edges. I've covered nearly every edge of this drawer now on the edges, so we shouldn't have any white showing around the edges of the drawer, which is great. Lovely. Touch of French linen here. Right, now I'm going to attack this lip, which is quite a lot of Amsterdam green and graphite I see. I'm just going to paint that in, see what we get, a bit more graphite there. Then it goes into fur almost. So we're going to stipple over that again. Kind of create organic shapes. Let's add a touch of fur to this side. Yeah, that's a good mix. Just here is quite a good mix. Right the way up to the bird. Then we'll change into the whites. A few touches of fur just in there. I'm going to go with this brush just to soften, maybe a little spritz of water so I've got freedom with the colour. Lovely. So we'll carry on with the other side of the bird here, which is kind of a mix of, I see a little bit of Amsterdam green mixed with fur, which I'm going to try that colour out, pretty good. And I'm going to add a touch of the browny shade. So this is some of the Enfleur and French linen, just to dirty that up a little bit, which is pretty good, that colour. We'll touch in along there, right the way up to where the bird joins its back, joins in. Quite happy with that shade, it's pretty good. This is a little bit more fur on the brush. Highlights, remember, fur is good for highlights. The odd little speckle of fur in there. So now you can see much cleaner connection. And I'm going to go down the edge of the other side of the drawer, which you can't see, but just to add a bit of colour into that edge. And underneath. Just to make sure we've got some colour on there. Very nice. Touch more graphite and Amsterdam green just to build up that colour on the edge. Nice clean connections everywhere. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now let's go in for fixing both of the birds internally. So what colour do we see in here? I see quite a warm French linen, maybe a touch of Enfleur and some white. So let's grab another brush. I'm going to use the same sort of colour mixes for this side. It's fractionally lighter, so we'll darken it with a little bit more Enfleur and graphite. More graphite I can see.
And then just remove off the top surface to keep the original image. Taking my cloth, cleaning that up, and allowing the paint to be on the inside connection. Much neater. Okay, so what I've done now, I've placed the drawers back in. I've removed the piece of timber on the inside and I've pushed the drawers back in. So this is all about the finer details of the overall image. And I want to put back the rushes back in the sky. I can just see them there. If you lose a bit of image, go back to the manufacturers and check out on their websites. You will find the original image. I painted this, so I'm pretty comfortable with what I've got to do. But I'm gonna take here, where I've gone over the sky, we've lost the crane's beak, and we've also, around here, it's got a little bit murky. For some reason, he's got a green splash in his eye, although that looks quite nice. But we're gonna add some highlights to him. So, from this side, light is passing this way in this image. So I'm gonna add some lights up here and down his neck, on his back. So I've got a variety of brushes, small brushes. This is an Annie detail brush, which we might use. And then these are kind of rigger brushes, longer bristles. So I've got 3 colors. I know that the bird likes to be white with a mix of a bit of French linen and also en fleur in odd places. So I'm gonna mix up a white, a grey sort of white here on the mix mat, adding a little bit of water. And you can see it's greyer this side and whiter this side. Just playing with the colours, and that seems pretty good. Adding some water. This small amount of water from the brush will add fluency to your paint. So I'm going to do the finer details. I'm taking a smaller brush now, and I'm going to go back in to this bird's forehead. I'm going to remove a little bit of paint because I know that's a bit too much. I'm going to start here, and we're just going to brush some little feathery, there is some feathers that go on his head, right the way in there. We will touch his eye in as well. So little feathery brush strokes on his face. We'll take a little bit of that green out around his eye. It's the finer details. This brush is really good because it's kind of old and it's got a little bit of, but I'm not going to do the backside of the bird's head because that's in the shadow. So there, I'm going to kind of fudge it in over that rebate. So that adds a little bit, and then we're going to travel down his neck. So I'm going to pick up another little bit of paint, offloading a little bit on a cloth, and we're going to add some light to the front of his body, or neck in this case. Just a few little streaks. This will really add dimension back to the image. Long brush strokes, a little bit heavy here. Oops. So you can smudge it out. Remember, this has got lacquer on, so you can kind of fix any problems. Say lacquer, this is actually infuser on this one, but you could use lacquer to top coat. And carry on right the way down, kind of pop that back in. So it really likes a little bit of a highlight, a little bit too much paint, but we can use that up. And then we'll add a little bit in this feathery. I'm gonna smudge that in with my finger. A little bit more here. So that, as you can see, the bird, I'm gonna go a bit more for his face, maybe adding a touch more white to my mix. Just a little bit more right on the brow of his head here, underneath his beak, down this side again. So those few little dashes, whoops, we're neatening up that edge around the rebate because that's what we had to rebuild. And then we'll do on his back. I might change brushes here for a little bit of a flat brush. So this is a flat sort of oval brush. We're going to go back in and add a few feathery brush strokes, because this is where the light would catch the back of the bird again. That's my door slamming shut. A little bit on there. And just little dashes. The whole painting was created in this manner. So the odd little dash here and there can really add a lot of difference over that rebate. So working with the paper and maybe just the odd in that plume. So a little bit more here, smudging it out, just lightening. Using my finger as well. I will also put his eye back in. So now let's take a little bit of this bird's beak. Oops, lost the brush. Right, we'll do the beak. So again, another colour mix here. We're going to go for a very small brush. So let me clean this brush. So Barcelona orange. And we're going to use quite a lot of Enfleur for the darkness of the beak. A bit more Barcelona orange to make sort of a browny orange. A touch of water. And I've got a little cloth here, so I like to just offload a bit of the paint. And I'm going to go back in and we're going to add a little bit of orange to the beak because we've lost it in the sky. A bit more paint. I'm going to touch the underneath with a tad more Enfleur here, because it will be darker underneath his beak. A bit more water. I'm not sure about this brush, it's splaying open, so let me just grab another one. This one's finer, so we'll grab this brush, wet. You might need, for these fine details, a really thin, there we go. He's got a really long beak. And then what I'm going to do is, oops, wobbly wobbly. We'll go, I've really wobbled that, that's it. So now we're going to go back in for the lighter colour on the top, the Barcelona orange, just along the top of his beak. So this is where light would catch the top of this bird's beak. Submerge that in. And if you really want to add another little bit of a highlight, pick up some white. Just a tiny bit of white, mixing in with the same colour again. Just a tiny little glimmer of white, just along the top somewhere, a little bit more. There we go, we have the crane's beak back in. which looks much sharper, which we're gonna do all of the other details exactly the same way, color matching as we go along. That color I now know is pretty good, the orange for the rushes. Also, what I have lost in the pattern is the crane's legs down here. Now I know that one goes straight down and the other one goes at an angle. You can just see it in the pattern, which is quite dark. So I'll be adding a touch of enfleur here. In fact, let's just do it now. Mixing up again some enfleur with that lovely ochre colour that we made, and water. I'm gonna get down on my knees for this. So I can see, oh, this is difficult. Right, let's move that to one side. I can see that one leg comes down straight. No, it doesn't, that way. It's difficult to see. I'll have to go back to my original image. Oopsie, look, mistake. So, take it out. It's just a suggestion of the leg, just highlighting. As if it was still there in the light. So now you can see there's a little bit more. Go back in with some more paint. And this leg is going to be a little bit more easier because I can see it. But it goes behind that leg. And it comes back this way. So, down there. Smallest of details, but makes the world of a difference when you're adding light and shadow to your image. So I'm going to touch the eyeball in. Now the eye was created with a circle, then a half crescent in white, and then a simple little dot of white. If I go over any of that, I will replace it, but I'm hoping not to. I just want to make it much deeper, and this time I'm going in with Athenian black, which will add that real dark sort of glassiness to the eye. Try and leave out the white little dot. Just sharpens the eye up because I did hit this with the sky. I'll make a little beak mark there. That's pretty good. Maybe a shadow just under those. That's nice. So now I'm going to go back in and add these brushes. I'm going to go for this brush, which is a rigger brush. You can see how long the hair is on this brush, so it holds a lot of paint and you can use it to make very long lines. So I'm going to go in with a mix of, it's an Enfleur Barcelona orange mix, touch of graphite in there as well. One moment while I mix this up. Add some water and offload. I'm kind of brushing my paint off the bristles just to allow not too much paint. So it's going to go right up into there, following that line. Again, just a suggestion of these rushes in the background. This is what's going to make your image have perspective. It's going to push, because we're going over the sky now, it's going to add a lot of definition. Might add another sort of twig in there. There wasn't one there, but a little twig will do. So now to address the rush. So I'm going to change brushes. Let's see, what have we got here. I'm going to use something that I've already used. Again, it's Barcelona Orange on Fleur mix. To make an ochre sort of colour. A bit more Barcelona Orange. Water. That's quite nice. Offloading the brush. Now, how I did this is just little dashes. So we're going to go in with little dashes into a cone sort of shape. No rhyme or reason. Little dots like that. We'll do the same again on this one. We'll start up here. Little dots, little dots. Random little marks. Maybe we will put a little bit of something here that's just kind of fading away. And then I'm going to go back in with the same brush, slightly more on Fleur into that mix, and add some depth in the inner part of these. So the odd little dash. Just to create some shadow in that little rush. Same again here. A little darkness in the center. There is one down there somewhere, but these are suggestions. You can see them more over the skyline. And I think what we're going to do is probably trail round the other side, some rushes on the other side to keep that going. There we go, as simple as that. Everything looks much more brighter now. Let's clean the decks. We'll just swivel this round to have a look what we're playing with on the other side. So I think now, because I know that the rushes go up that way, I think I'm gonna just trail some coming out here and up on this side, just to add some more detail. I'm gonna leave this as dead space, I think. So where's my rigger brush? I need my rigger brush, the long-haired brush. Here it is, one rigger brush. And I'm gonna go with my on Fleur, mixing it on the mix mat down here. Adding a splash of water to that mix. Add a bit of graphite just to deepen that. And we're going to go in. So where do I want my highest one? I think my highest one needs to be here for balance. So I'm going to go in here, place the brush. I'm just going to drag it down, simple as, into the background. We're going to add about 3 maybe 4. Another one here, lower down. Bit more water fluency again. Maybe one up here. And that can come down the crevice. I think we're going to do one up here as well, sort of going slightly across. That feels good. And then we'll add just another little nuance down there. So changing brushes again, we're going to go in with a touch of the golden colour, Barcelona Orange and on Fleur as a mix. And we're going to do little dashes again. We'll start up here. Oops, that's a mistake. Happy accidents. I'm just going to take a little bit of water just to block that off. That's on raw chalk paint, so just to remove that, back in, sort of conical shaped, almost like corn sheaths. Same again. Suggestions of something there. We'll go a bit higher on that one. And you can see it's just me tapping the brush in a random fashion right up here. Some down there. And then slightly less on this one. And then we can go back in with a little bit more on Fleur on the same brush. Remember adding in the centery parts of each one of these a little bit more darkness, a few little spots of darkness in there. Might add sort of a leaf here. On Fleur. Needs a bit more just along the bottom here. I think we have it. Maybe a little highlight on this. Because the branches would get a little bit of highlight. We'll go to the rigger brush for that. Just up here. And here. So, travel this one round the corner a little bit. So the final thing that I'm doing is just highlighting some of the pond lilies. This is meant to be like a lagoon, and all I'm adding is just broad dashes here and there over the dark where I think a pond lily might be. So just horizontal dashes, and as they go further away, a little less, a little smaller dashes. You can see here, I've added one here, here, and just the odd suggestion again of a brighter green. I might add a touch darker here because it feels like it needs to go darker a little bit further on there. And I'm doing the same on the other side. This little stretch here, I'm adding 1 or 2 just broad horizontal sort of flying sort of shapes, and then as they go into the distance, a little less. Bigger at the bottom, so it adds that real sense of perspective as they go away. Simple as, it just suggests that there's light sitting on top of the pond lilies. And that's it really. So all that's left to do now here is I'm going to wax the whole piece of artwork because I've got the top and the bottom to work on. I'm going to try and marry that into my other piece of furniture. So there's a little bit of gold leafing to go on as well. I may speed up most of that because this is a super long tutorial, but I really wanted to take the time so you could see all of the details that bring it all together. So let's get this completely dry, wax on, and then we can move on to painting the top because this will all be protected. If we drop any paint on it, we can wipe it away. So I'm nearly there with the project, a little bit of gold leafing and some primer red around the edge. The olive has dried on top, so my original piece had what looked like a leather sort of inlay in the centre with cracks in it. It's a long time since I've done this and I don't know my colour mix, so I'm just going to have a go at this. All I'm going to do is take some masking tape and line up the edges. This is double thickness, so it's going to give me a sort of square inset. I'm going to go all the way around. We're going to work on the centre part. Now, as I said, I can't remember the colour mix. It was kind of like a tan looking leather, which you know that I've used tan quite a lot. It's one of my favourite colours. And I think some of the colours weren't around when I originally did this, but I'm going to try mixing Barcelona orange and Provence for this. Line up there. Doesn't have to be perfect. So now we have this square, which is going to be this faux sort of cracked leathery look. Right, let's take a bowl and have a go at mixing a colour. Let's grab the Barcelona orange. I've got on Fleur as well, but I'm not quite sure whether that'll be needed. So I need quite a lot of paint for this. More Barcelona orange than anything. And a touch of Provence. I have no idea what colour this is going to make. I have a feeling it will make like a tan. Yeah, it is neutralising it, a little bit more Provence, and then if we need a touch of Enfleur in there, we'll see. And I know that I use dark wax over the top, so it could possibly be this way. I think I'm just going to add a touch of Enfleur in there, just to kind of make it a little bit more muddy. If this colour doesn't match, it is what it is. I'm just going to go with it. I quite like that colour. We need plenty of it. I think with dark wax over the top, that could be good. Go a touch more Enfleur. Forgive my cans of paint, please. I'm going to go with that. Right, so we have got the paint straight from the can. I quite like that colour. Let me grab, I have a hairdryer to hand. So, how to crackle the paint if this works. It's such a long time since I've done this. So we're going to apply the paint kind of quite bulky, straight from the can, in random patches. So some thick areas, some thin areas. So you can see there's quite a body of paint on the surface. That's why you need quite a lot. And the idea is to heat up the chalk paint and it will form like a skin on top. The underneath will stay quite wet where it's thick, and it should crack. In theory, it should crack. It does take a while for it to crack. You have to keep on the heat on maximum on the hairdryer and just keep on blow drying until we get those interesting crackle marks. So brush strokes kind of any what way. There we go, and in with the hairdryer. Here and now, probably I'm gonna make a big mistake by doing this. Because I've got a lot of body of paint there, I'm gonna pull the tape off now while it's still slightly damp. If this kind of bleeds through, I will go back with the olive and neaten up afterwards, but I just feel that it's the right time now rather than cracking the paint off afterwards. So I'm gonna gently pull away. May need to be a little bit of touching up afterwards whilst I can. And there's a little bit of bleed through there, not too bad. All of this can be neatened up afterwards. Lose that bit and we'll go with this bit, because if I keep on drying it, it will crack at the edge rather not in a very nice way. You can see there where it's quite dry and gloopy, but there we go. Pretty well behaved. I think my colour is probably a little bit lighter than the other one, but hey ho, dark wax can fix this. There's a little bit of the through, but pretty good. Last piece, and then we'll carry on drying. You need to keep on going with the hairdryer until it's really dry, otherwise the cracks will settle, so you just need to keep on going and going and going for quite a while. Very nice. Let's begin. So finally, I'm at my last bit of paint work, and this is primer red to receive some gold leaf. Now, the original project, I put gold leaf quite worn around the edges of the upper trim and the lower trim. I've already applied some masking tape just so that I don't get paint where I don't want it. And I'm just going to go in with a quick coat of primer red. Primer red is traditionally used, the colour is traditionally used behind gold leaf. And we're just going to go in, a light tickle on the edge so that we don't go onto the paintwork. Now I'm going to add the gold size, which looks a little bit like this. This is an old tin. Both of them are old. Gold size is a glue for gold leaf. It basically, you cannot use any other glue than this glue. This is that old. Yeah, there we go. Just about opens. It's kind of squeaky. So gold size, you apply to anywhere that you would like your gold leaf to be. A light coat. I'm not going to be too particular about this. If there's broken areas where there isn't leaf, that's good. And what you'll find is it'll go on opaque, a little bit purpley, and then it will dry clear when it's ready to rock and roll. So I'm going to go in with my gold leaf. I've got a brush, a dry brush here, just to tap it into position. I'm going to pick up the gold leaf And we're going to go straight for this corner. Move it along, go like that. I'm allowing them to be kind of a little bit broken. There's a few little cracks, which I don't mind. Little bits of primer red showing here and there. Because I want to go for that really aged look. Use all your little bits. And then we can take away any excess. A little bit there, that might need, whoops. Any little excess that you don't need, reuse. That's lovely. And what I'm going to do is lightly sand that edge, just lightly with a sanding pad, and add dark wax into the crevice. I'm going to sand some of this away as well. So I'm just about finished with the project. I'm finishing off with an AnnieSloan sanding pad. I'm using the green one, which is the finest grit. And I'm making a neater connection between my gold leaf and my primer red onto the olive, almost bringing back to the wood on the edges of the cabinet, which is really, really nice, which makes a lovely little key line. And also I'm going into the gold leaf to the primer red. I really want this to be very time worn on the edges. And we will be adding clear wax and dark wax into the crevices of that cracked leather look. The final thing to do is pop the new handles into place. I'm going to speed up the video because this has been a super long tutorial, so you can just see all of the magic happen at the end. Don't forget to stay to the end result shots. I always like people to see it in all of its glory at the end. If you're new to my channel, welcome. It's a wonderful community here. The premieres on Wednesday evenings, there's loads of wonderful people all having fun and enjoying watching the tutorials and asking each other questions. So please do that. Lots of questions into the description box. It helps everybody learn. So for now, thank you for joining me. I will catch you all next time.